Good morning, everyone. It is Wednesday, March the 24th, 2021. It is currently 10:13 a.m. Central Time. I'm coming to you live from Victory Baptist Church, located right here in Ovalo, Texas. And we're going to take a few minutes and we're going to travel to France. And we're going to look at a new law in France that has some Christians worried. So we're going to try to understand exactly what this law is, exactly what is going on. Should Christians in France be worried, and what could we possibly learn from the situation? I heard this late last night and got here this morning. I grabbed the audio. I don't remember everything I heard late last night because for those who don't know, what I do when I go to sleep, I go to sleep listening to all kinds of things because, well, I have to do that because if I'm sitting there in silence, my brain is always moving at like 1,000,000 miles per second. And it's like chaos in my brain all the time. So if I can turn on something and I can focus on one thing, a sermon, a lecture from some university, something, then my mind will calm down enough that I can get a couple of hours of sleep. So somewhere in the night, I heard this on one of the podcasts I subscribe to. The World and Everything in It is a podcast I subscribe to. And this is a segment from an episode that from a podcast episode, I believe yesterday. I believe it was yesterday. It may have been the day before. I can't remember. But they talk about this new law in France and how, well, some Christians are worried about it. So maybe you already are aware of this. Maybe you're not. But let's analyze it and see. Let's see. If you're listening to me live, as always, feel free to jump into the chat, say hello, throw in your thoughts or opinions, because in many cases, I've stated it so many times, the listeners to this program, I think, could do a better job than I can. When they email me, they're far more articulate than I am. They tend to have a better grasp of the situations than I do. So sometimes I don't know why I'm the one behind the microphone talking, because I think the listeners could do a better job. So you may already be very familiar with this entire situation going on in France. If you are, feel free to give me your expertise. I always appreciate it. But here we go.
Coming up next on The World and Everything in It, battling extremism in France.
Earlier this year, France's National Assembly passed a bill targeting Islamic separatists. But the measures included in the law would apply to all religions, and that has the nation's evangelicals concerned. World European correspondent Jenny Lynn Schmidt explains why.
Samuel Paty est devenu vendredi.
The brutal murder of middle school teacher Samuel Paty last October shocked France. President Emmanuel Macron immediately vowed action against further sectarian violence. The tragedy fast-tracked his plan to update French church-state separation laws. The goal is to keep a better eye on what's being taught in certain mosques and prevent potential hotspots of radicalization.
What this law is aiming at is radical terrorism.
Pierre Berthaud is professor and president emeritus at the Faculté Jean Calvin in Aix-en-Provence, one of France's few evangelical Protestant seminaries.
That it cannot name it, because if it named it, it would be accused of discrimination. But what the law is aiming at is radical Islamism, but it is obliged to make a general law.
France passed the original law in 1905, when the main religious difference was between Protestants and the Catholic majority. Kevin Comer is a Baptist pastor and coordinator for the National Council of French Evangelicals. He says the old law has always been protective of the rights of evangelicals.
As evangelicals, we are kind of grateful for that law because we have a certain freedom of speech, a freedom of cults, living our faith together.
But the proposed changes are troubling. The first problem is administrative.
The treasurer of the association of the church, his work is going to be much more complicated, and the accounts that it has to handle will have to be handled almost professionally.
Financial reports would need to be certified by a public accountant, costing several $1,000s. evangelical congregations in France average 50 people, and many can't afford to pay a full-time pastor's salary. Smaller churches would be forced to either close down entirely or to band together with other congregations to hold worship services, called cults in French.
The other main thing is that we are going to have some kind of surveillance on what we are going to teach and on what we are going to preach. And this is a huge issue. There is going to be some kind of cult police that is going to watch over us in this kind of surveillance kind of way.
Authorities want to know what's being taught in separatist mosques, but in order to not discriminate, they'll also be checking in to see what's taught in other worship services. That could be problematic for churches that preach biblical views on marriage and gender in a society where the mainstream no longer holds those views. An official might decide biblical views are separatist, and this law would give the authority to close the church. The law also takes aim at education and funding for religious organizations from abroad. That's meant to curb the influx of radical Muslim clerics into France. But again, any potential measure would apply to Christians as well. David Niblack is executive director of the Bible Institute of Geneva.
We're a small evangelical Bible school here in Geneva, and we're partnered with a number of French church groups. So most, I'd say 3/4 of our students are coming from France. Geneva sticks out into France. We're surrounded by France. And so most students are coming from France to study here in Geneva and then go back to do internships and then ministry in France.
Niblack says the school is keeping a close eye on the progress of the law. A ban on foreign training would shut the Bible school down. But for now,
no one is worried that this is going to cause problems for French people studying here in Switzerland. It's especially those coming outside of Europe, and then that they may have to declare, if I understood correctly, declare kind of what kind of training, and there's a little bit more oversight of the government on their training, but it's not an absolute. No one can no longer study outside of France.
Another problematic provision is that churches and other organizations will need to report all foreign donations over $12,000. But Berthaud says Christian mission organizations shouldn't worry because the law is aimed at state funding, not donations from individuals or groups.
Nous ne pouvons plus discuter avec des gens qui refusent d'écrire sur un papier.
De courants évangéliques et parfois aussi un certain nombre de dérives.
Il n'y a pas que l'islam qui est concerné, les évangéliques.
Perhaps the hardest thing that surfaced in the debate over the law are the misconceptions about evangelical Christians that have been repeated by politicians and the media. In an effort to not point a finger at the nation's Muslims, Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin said, quote, evangelicals are a very important problem, and that, quote, we can no longer have discussion with people who refuse to write on paper that the law of the Republic is higher than the law of God. Such statements are difficult for a group that's already very much the minority, making up only 1% of the population. The National Council of French Evangelicals has reported to the government what it sees as the most troubling parts of the legislation, and it has made suggestions for changes. And they're also calling Christians to pray. Kevin Comer says Christians need to peacefully speak up, even as they work for the peace of their nation.
We need to pray for evangelical churches as a whole, so that the society could understand that evangelical is a group of people that is not. We are not just Jesus freaks, to say such a thing, but we are wise. We can understand the society, and we are a friend of the Republic, friend of the state, friend of the government. Well, in some way, we do have faith, we do have beliefs, but we are not enemy of the state.
The French Senate will take up debate at the end of March. Reporting for World, I'm Jenny Lynn Schmidt.
Additional support comes from...
There you have it. Wow. There are some definitely problems, it seems, that may be coming to the church in France. So please pray about the situation. Please, if you hear or see any more reporting on the situation in France, please let me know. This is something that we want to watch, especially as they begin to debate this at the end of March, what's going to happen to the churches in France. This is one of those situations where this is an interesting situation because of how this is being structured. All right, so you have what they're concerned with Islamic extremism. And Islamic extremism bringing, basically violence and killing to their country. And so they want to fight against it. And so to fight against it, they have to pass laws. And to pass those laws, they have to do it in a way that doesn't seem to indicate discrimination against only Islam. So therefore, the laws have to be applied to all religions, which would include Christianity. Some of these laws obviously deal with the financial reporting, right, which could go after small churches. It would cost so much for them to do the finances the way they're supposed to do them. That could pretty much eliminate them. Basically, the idea that they're going to monitor what you're teaching, which could be problematic in a society that does not hold to the Christian worldview when it comes to homosexuality, that sex is only between a man and a woman, homosexuality is sinful. They monitor that, then you get labeled as basically being, I think they said the word separatist. Your church could be shut down. So you have two ways of shutting down Christian churches right there. And then almost sounding like you have to sign a document saying the law of the land is above the law of God. Now, that would be massively problematic. I don't know if that would actually occur within the way the law is currently structured, but that sounds very problematic and could really go after churches. So this is I will put this in the category of concerning. But it demonstrates the difficulty whenever you want to go after one religion. I've talked this. Sometimes American Christians, they fall into this trap, which sometimes just it goes a lot of different ways. So there's the situation in France. So let's do this. There's the situation in France. Please pray about it. Please research it. If you find anything that contradicts what we just heard, please let me know. If you find anything that adds more detail to what we just discussed, let me know. If it's a podcast, if you can send me, a link so that I can download the podcast episode, that makes it easy for me to get the audio so that we can listen to it together. But just be praying for the situation in France. Please pray for the situation in France, because this could really eliminate some small churches and could be very problematic moving forward. But let's take this idea of, okay, so you see a problem in one religion, you go after all religions. I want to just throw out some different ideas that I see American Christians, the way they think, that sometimes is so confusing. American Christians always want to fight, obviously, for our religious freedom. And sometimes we want that religious freedom exercised in ways that I don't think Christians ever really think about. For example, all right, we want, like some Christians want prayer reinstituted in the public school system. They want a led prayer, right, for the students, someone leading prayer, and a Christian prayer placed in school. Whenever Christians say that, I'm always dumbfounded. I'm like, wait, why would you want that? Because if you're going to argue for Christians being able to lead prayer in school, you have to give that same freedom to Muslims, to Satanists, to anybody else. But Christians say, no, just Christian prayer. Well, wait, that's not freedom of religion. In fact, you're forcing now your religion upon every student. We want the Bible taught in public school. Okay. If you want the Bible taught in public school, then you have to believe, you want the Quran taught in public. You want religious text of all religion. But no, if Islam's being taught in a public school, Christians lose their mind. Well, if you want that freedom for you, you've got to extend that freedom for others. At the same time, when after 9/11, there were Christians who supported banning mosque being built in certain cities. Like Christians were like, no, we don't want a mosque built in our city or in our neighborhood. I'm like, whoa. You better slow down. Because if you want to ban the building of mosque by Muslims in your city, well, then at some point, someone could create a bill banning the building of a church in their city. You've got to be very careful with that. So whenever you try to crack down on religion, because there's extremism in some religion that leads to violence, well, then that's going to have to be applied to all religions. That's always problematic. If you demand a freedom, then you have to have that freedom for everyone. This has happened in some state capitol buildings, like some city councils, where we want a religious display inside the state capitol building, say for Christmas, and well, then the Satanists come along and say, well, we want a display as well. And in some state capitals, they've had to do that, and Christians get upset. Well, why? If you want the freedom to display your religious symbols, then other religions have to have the right to display their religious symbols. We want Congress or Senate to open up with a prayer. Okay, you're going to get a Christian prayer sometimes, and you may get a prayer led by a Satanist. You can't get mad at that. So the freedoms you demand for yourself are the freedoms you are demanding for others. The freedoms you seek to take away from others will ultimately be the freedoms you take away from yourself. That's the way it works. If you want freedom, you have to extend freedom. If you take away freedom, you have to be willing to sacrifice your freedom, which is always problematic. And so, yes, and I think Christians have to sometimes think of all of those situations through. So I don't know. I don't know how this is going to play out in France. I don't have enough insight or expertise into the politics there to say what's going to happen. I understand that extremism, showed its ugly head. There was death, and now they want to do something about it, and it could take away freedoms from Christian churches. It could be the elimination of small Christian churches. It could mean some serious situations moving forward, and maybe many Christians finding themselves in the opposite side of the law and having to face some kind of persecution. We definitely need to pray about the situation and pray that the Christians demonstrate wisdom and maybe that some of these laws are reconsidered and how they're going to be they're going to be carried out. And here's the main thing. If another attack occurs in France from an Islamic extremist, if it's a bombing, if it's a shooting, and there's multiple deaths, then this kind of law will be passed. It won't be any question. See, what happens when a major tragedy happens, then a lot of people want to do something, but that tragedy fades relatively quick, and then people move on. But if another one happens while this is being debated, it's over. The law is going to be passed, and Christians are going to be swept up within the law, and they're going to have to face those consequences, and it could be very interesting to watch. So you just continue to pray about the situation in France. And again, you be my eyes and ears. I ask of you, you help me so much with that. And if you hear anything else about this, let me know. That was The World and Everything in It. I would definitely recommend you subscribe to that podcast, The World and Everything in It. I think they do a very good job of bringing lots of good information. So subscribe to that. And I'll just leave it right there. There's more I could say, but I just wanted to bring this to everyone's attention. I don't know if you knew about it. I know when I heard it, I was like, whoa, wait, what's going on in France? Wait. Okay. I haven't heard this reported anywhere else. Let's pay attention. So we need to get, obviously, we want a secondary confirmation. We want confirmation about what's going on in France. We want other interpretations of what's going on in France. So anything you find, feel free to be a part of the research team, and we'll see if we can help inform all of us to what exactly is going on there. But please be praying, and I'll keep you informed as you help me stay informed. All right? Everyone have a great day. God bless.